Good evening, my friends, and welcome again to this today's lesson. I have prepared I have prepared a series of short lectures about conflict analysis. In the past lectures that we have undertaken, we discussed the meaning of conflict, and we have said that conflict involves two or more parties, and that it involves about a struggle for uh, different goals. So people engage in conflict, or they are engaged in conflict because they have different goals in life. And often, because of scarce resources and different methods of achieving these goals, they are engaged in conflict. And we have also explored the different frameworks for understanding the nature of conflict. And our purpose then was not to come up with a theory, but rather to come up with a framework in order for us to understand the nature of conflict and be able to understand and locate the sources of this conflict. And conflict has different layers, as we have said. It can be on a personal level, it can be on an interpersonal level, and it can be on a communal level. It can also be in on the national and even in the international level. And we say that peace and conflict can also be beyond our existence or in our esoteric approach to existence. And we also discuss particularly some of the classical framework, particularly the theory, no, the frameworks designed by Johann Galtung, which is about the positive peace, the negative peace, the direct violence, and the structural violence. And these are very important seminal ideas in the kind of work in conflict resolution work that we are doing today. These are very important seed ideas that help us understand the nature of conflict. And this particularly, Johann Galtung was well known for his structural violence framework in helping us understand that sometimes violence is a result not of a personal desire or a personal action, but rather because of certain social structures that are perpetuated in society that create this system of injustice and systematic violence. And maybe later on, as we go on with it, deeper into the course, we will be looking into this more in detail. But today, I would like to introduce you to the topic of conflict analysis. You know, analysis is very important in understanding a particular phenomenon or situation. So, just like in your biology class or in your zoology class, where you have to dissect the different parts of an animal or the body of an animal or the different parts of plants, the purpose of this is to be able to understand the totality of that organism. So, in the same way, if we look at society or the society of human beings as an organism in itself from the functional point of view, then we need to understand the different parts that makes the totality of the sum of everything. And in a sense, when we look at social conflict, it is also a kind of phenomenon that needs to be dissected and to be understood. Because as it is, we see what it is, but it is important that we dissect its different parts so that we will understand more fully the meaning and be able to come up with recommendations of our own. So allow me to share the slides that I have prepared here. And I'm going to share with you this slide about the introductory slide on the conflict analysis. So, what is conflict analysis? Why should we be interested in conflict analysis? Perhaps this kind of question is already very obvious because all of us are students of conflict resolution, and as such, it behooves us to be interested in the topic of conflict analysis. Now, conflict analysis is a different. It's a more of a particular topic in conflict resolution. So there are 4 reasons why we should be interested in the study of conflict analysis, or maybe in acquiring the skill of conflict analysis. The first one is to understand the background and history of conflict. Conflict does not happen in a vacuum. Conflict does not happen in the air, but rather it is interconnected with the history and situatedness of the human being. Because our human existence is rooted in history. It is rooted in the movement of time. And all of us are influenced by the factors uh, surrounding our own existence. And these factors surrounding our own existence in the spectrum of time becomes the background and the historicity of the conflict. So we can understand the magnitude, the effect of this conflict because of its history and background, how it developed. Then the second reason why we should be interested in the study of conflict analysis is we have to identify the relevant groups in the conflict. A conflict is an activity. sorry, sorry. This is an event that involves several people. So there are different layers of involvement, different layers of um, relationships, and different layers of dealing with each other. So we will discuss this more in detail as we go on with a series of these lectures. Then the third reason why we should be interested in conflict analysis is we need to understand the perceptions of the groups in conflict, including the hidden ones. Because people perceives each other. We have our own perceptions, and this is very difficult to study because perceptions are subjective. It is within the consciousness of the person. Sorry. And there's no other person who can enter into that consciousness. And it is usually our expression, the words that we speak, the things that we write are the only ones, are the indicators of our perceptions and our attitudes. And sometimes people are not keen to reveal all of their own perceptions. Sometimes some people are secretive, and sometimes they try to hide things. And these are the things that we need to discover, because without discovering these hidden motives behind people, our solution to the problem, our solution to the conflict, our recommendations will not be complete. Then number 4, we have to understand the factors and the trends that underpin the conflict. Conflict does not happen in isolation. Sometimes it happens in conjunctions with other people, with other groups, and with other triggers. These triggers are people or situations that happen within the periphery of the conflict activity. They may not have a direct association with the root cause of the conflict, but they are within the periphery, influencing the escalation, the magnitude, or the de-escalation of a particular conflict. So let's go to the next slide. These are some of the challenges and obstacles to conflict analysis. So kung kayo ay gagawa ng conflict analysis, ito yung mga dapat isaalang-alang natin, kasi alalahanin natin na ang conflict analysis is a tool. Let us remember that conflict analysis is a tool for conflict resolution. And as a tool, it has its own utility. So yung utility ng tool na yan will depend upon the situation and will depend upon the applicability of the tool. Because probably today the tool may be useful, but tomorrow the tool may not be applicable anymore. That's why we have to understand these different elements in conflict analysis so that we will be able to use it correctly. We should be able to apply it in a timely manner that will be productive. Yan. So there are actually four challenges. You have the time, the dynamics of conflict, the triggers, and the behaviors. Number 1 is the time. Conflict analysis as an activity is a time-consuming activity. So kung pag napadami mo yung the time doon sa pag-analyze ng conflict, it might be a waste of time, because by the time that you finish your analysis or your study, the problem must have already evolved into something else, into some other forms. And perhaps you will find that your analysis and your recommendations are no longer applicable or practical. So we have to take into consideration the time. So there should be time management and decisiveness. Now, the second challenge is the dynamic or the phase of conflict. Remember that conflict is not static, but rather it is dynamic, it evolves, and even the relationship of people involved in this conflict could change. Kasi it is possible na ngayon magkakampi sila, then tomorrow magkaaway na sila, or probably tomorrow ngayon hindi naman sila magkaaway, tomorrow magkaaway na sila, or ito hindi naman nila kakampi ngayon, maybe tomorrow kakampi na nila. And because of that changes in relationship, the escalation of the conflict might also change. This is what I mean by dynamic or the phase of conflict. That's why we have to be time conscious, and we should be able to apply our solution in a more decisive way, because if we don't do it, the conflict may change, and it will render our analysis useless. Then third is the trigger. We have to pay attention that in a particular conflict situations, there might be trigger. Itong mga trigger nito, ito yung mga elements na nasa labas sila ng conflict situation. Hindi naman sila kaparte ng ugat o pinagmumulan ng conflict, pero they have this power, they have this power to influence the magnitude and the complexity of the conflict. Kasi itong mga triggers na to, this could be people, this could be leaders, and this can also be impersonal in such a way na this could be situations like for example the inflation. Inflation can be economic, itong inflation ito, economic phenomenon ito could trigger a particular conflict. Like for example, the short supply of rice or commodities can trigger conflict, or maybe a military build-up. Yan. Or maybe a statement, a political statement made by another country against another country can trigger the conflict. It can give rise to, like say, for example, arms race. It can move other countries to engage in militarization, etc. Then another is behavior. Behaviors of stakeholders may be difficult to analyze. Remember that people behave in a different way. Sorry. Kaya nga minsan, ang mga politicians, when they make speeches, for example, particularly national leaders, when they make speeches, some of the political analysts are paying attention to these speeches. So hinihimay-himay nila yung mga speech na yon, pinag-aaralan yung mga statements. Kasi itong mga speeches nila, ito yung mga indicators ng kanilang behavior. It can be the indicators of what is inside their mind, what is their perception. So iniintindi nila ito. So kailangan maunawaan natin kung ano ang mga behavior ng ating kalaban o ng mga party sa conflict na yan. Kung hindi man kalaban, kasi kung hindi naman tayo bahagi ng conflict, mediator tayo, then we should be able to understand this behavior. So kailangan maunawaan natin kung meron bang, is there a pattern sa kanyang behavior? Meron ba siyang sinusunod na pattern? Is there a regularity in his behavior? Or meron bang erratic doon sa behavior niyang yun? So, kailangan maintindihan natin. So, my friends, these are the four challenges and obstacles to conflict analysis. And we need to pay attention to this if we want to use conflict analysis as a tool in conflict resolution. So if we set all these four challenges, we can look at it from the point of view of a framework. So you have the people or stakeholders, the core problem or issue, and the process. Okay. So ito, in order for us to be able to understand the four elements of conflict analysis or of conflict, we have to remember that the four questions, the 3W and 1H, the who, the what, the when, and the how. So when we say the who, we are referring to the people or the stakeholders. These are the people who have a direct and indirect interest in that particular conflict. Then the second is the issue or the core problem or the what. Ito yung pinag-aawayan nila. This is now the bone of contention. This is the point that they are arguing with, fighting with. So that is the what. So when the third context is the where and the when, kailan nangyari at saan. Yung pagkakataon, yung specific location niya sa history at saka yung kanyang geography has something to do with the conflict. It has something to do with their behavior. It is has something to do with their perception of security. It is also something to do with how they behave in that particular conflict. Then, fourthly, you have the how. What is the process of response? Is it violent or is it non-violent ang approach na ginagamit nila? Or does it shift from violence to non-violence, then again to violence, etc.? Okay, so if we set these four factors into a framework, it will look like this. So these are now the elements of a conflict. You have the people or stakeholders, the core problem or issue, the process, and the context. So ito, iba-ibang pamamaraan ito. For example, kung gusto mong pag-aralan yung mga tao at saka mga stakeholders sa conflict na yan, kailangan ma-identify mo sino ang primary party to this conflict, sino yung mga secondary party at sino yung mga tertiary. Kasi pag sinabi nating primary, ito yung mga taong sila yung talagang direct involved sa conflict. Ang mga secondary naman, sila yung mga taong wala naman talaga silang party doon sa conflict na yon, but they are showing interest in that particular conflict because they know the outcome of this conflict will benefit them or will affect them. Then you also have the third party. Ito yung mga marites na nakatingin-tingin lang, patingin-tingin lang. Maybe they will not be affected, but they are watching kasi maybe taking opportunity or whatever. Kaya ito mga bagay na dapat maintindihan. Sino yung mga tao? Sino yung mga stakeholders na yan? Then another is the core problem or issue. Ano ba ang pinag-aawayan nila? Tandaan natin na ang conflict, when we look at the conflict, we can compare it into the onion. Meron silang tinatawag na, kung gagamitin natin yung the onion analysis, meron siyang inner layer, then middle layer, then outer layer. Maybe yung inner layer na yon, yung nasa gitna, yun ang need nila, yun ang need. Yung kanilang middle layer, yun ang kanilang position. Yung third layer, yung action na ginagawa nila. So in other words, mga kapatid, ang mga tao, when they engage in conflicts and when you observe their behavior, yung kanilang behavior na yon is not really indicative of the thing that will satisfy them to make them stop engaging in violent way. Kasi yung nakikita mong nila, mga position lang yun. Like for example, if you see people rallying, if you see people doing vandalism, etc., yun lang ang kanilang position. Kumbaga, yun ang kanilang outward na ipinapakita. Pero deep inside, at the back of all these activities, there is a layer there that speaks about the need. Na if we are able to meet that need or satisfy that need, maybe people will stop from engaging in violent behavior. So yan. Ito naman yung process. Ano ba ang proseso ano ba ang behavior ng mga participants sa conflict? Are they prone to war? Have they abandoned the use of violence or are they manifesting violent behavior? Then third is we also have to understand the context of the conflict. Sorry. Ano itong mga context na to? Itong mga context na to, ito yung sinasabi natin na ito yung mga sinasabi natin na this can be economic, this can be people, this can be politicians, and yung mga events na nangyari sa buhay ng tao o kaya yung mga disaster, example. These are yung kanilang for example, yung kanilang political system, social system, religious system. Ito yung mga bagay na may kinalaman doon sa kanilang conflict. May kinalaman ito doon sa kanilang behavior and approach how they look at conflict. So later on, I will be talking to you in detail about the context of the problem. Yung sinabi natin na where and how. Then later on, I will be talking about the issue or the core problem, the stakeholders analysis, and the process of response. And later on, please take note, please pay attention to this because you will be using this in your project later on. Kasi mahirap magbigay ng mga specific example sa ganitong ano. I am just laying down to you the process, and later on when we engage in our own case analysis, mas mauunawaan natin, mas maa-appreciate natin itong content ng lecture na ito kasi magagamit na natin, maa-apply na natin doon sa real life situation. So I will end this first part of the lecture and abangan ninyo yung susunod na lecture nito. So thank you very much for listening to me.